Hi, welcome to the Earth Forward podcast. My name is Leonardo De Alba, and I'll be your host today, where we're going to chat about everything about the environment. Today, we are joined by Sam Creasy, a good friend of mine, who will be our guest today in discussing issues and solutions about the environment. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself and what kind of person you are?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Creasy, as Leo mentioned. Um, I am a CS major right now, and I care a lot about the environment, so I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you. And as a CS major, a computer science major, how does the environment concern you in your field?
Well, the biggest thing is that, especially right now, is you have those big AI data centers that um, take up not only a lot of water per se, but it's the noise pollution as well, which disrupts a lot of the local wildlife around the area and even disrupts humans who might live around that area as well. Um, so that's the biggest thing, I believe. In terms of like specific servers for like backend and front end things, I think it's very eco-friendly, and the computer science job market has done a very good job at not pushing the limits against nature.
I see. So you believe that hiring humans to perform coding is just more efficient than constructing potentially environmentally hazardous infrastructure in order to do the same job?
In terms of environmentalism, yes, but in terms of regular job output, of course, no. Of course, machines are going to be faster than humans, but there's both pros and cons of both sides.
Interesting. And I've also heard about the noise pollution with the data centers, but I heard it was more about the frequencies that the data centers output that humans can't necessarily hear, but it still affects them. Have you heard anything about that?
I've seen things about that. I don't know if it's necessarily true or not. I haven't done a lot of digging on that, but there has been very good documentation on the actual noises that the data centers produce. So a lot of people are very against it. And if that is true with the frequency that we can't hear but can still affect us, that would even be another big downside where it's just, you know, if we can't hear it, imagine the animals that could hear it, right?
Right, of course. Interesting. All right. I'm glad we have a computer science major like you that can give an opinion about AI and environmentalism because it's very topical. Um,
Yeah, it is. It is.
yeah. Um, I mean, in that case, let's move on to more about AI in the environment. Like, do you believe
Mhm.
companies are sacrificing the environment in order to build data centers? In terms of like, do you think they could be paying more money to still make these data centers, but not make them so annoying is the easiest way. And an example of this is instead of water cooling, they can use other chemical solutions for cooling that are more expensive. And also the locations and real estate they pick, it's very cheap, but as you said, for local wildlife and the population, it's not very convenient for them. So do you believe data centers can still be made using, like, even if companies have to sacrifice? Or do you believe that pushing AI forward will is worth it?
I think right now, no. I think in the future, 100% yes. But I think one thing that I skipped over earlier is a lot of people talk about the noise pollution and the water as well, especially the water one. That has been a very hot topic. but it also takes up a ton of electricity. I mean, a lot. So the even though they could push, like you said, using maybe chemicals instead of wasting water, or find a safer alternative to actually make sure that it can cool efficiently, it'll still be taking up a lot of electricity that we just don't have the infrastructure for. And I think that's a lot of the problems with these AI companies is that they have a really good idea that they want, and they have a really good solution for a lot of difficulties in the job market, but they just don't do it the right way, if that makes sense. They want to get it done now rather than wait into the future.
Interesting. Okay. See, I agree. I believe that companies are pushing for like more infrastructure with AI rather than focusing on quality in terms of technological improvement. Because it seems like they're just building more and more and more, buying up all the RAM, buying up all the graphics cards, all the real estate, where I feel like they could wait until they push for AI more, but at the same time, we'll see where that leads because if AI does pay off, I believe that AI can be used to solve all these issues, including environmental issues. But
Mhm.
moving on, I want to get your opinions on nuclear energy. What are your baseline thoughts? Like, does it scare you? Do you think it can work? Do you think we should shift to something else?
Well, obviously, it's a scary topic when you take a look at the failures that's had. But in terms of the failures, it's it's interesting to see that you could count them on one hand rather than the actual nuclear power plants that haven't failed. And a lot of those failures was, I mean, Chernobyl, right? That was a failure of the people working there and the way that the political structure of the Soviet Union was uh, constructed, where it was very prone to, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I don't want to be blamed. And then the Fukushima disaster in Japan, that was not due to anybody's fault. It was the tsunami that hit it back in March of 2011. And I think if we can kind of have hindsight on that, like the AI, right? We can have hindsight for a lot of those things that's like vulnerable with nuclear energy. I think it could be one of the greatest advancements of mankind because not only is it not only does it produce a metric ton of energy, but it's also safer for the environment and for the people. But again, we have to have that hindsight because we don't want a Chernobyl, right? That's why a lot of people don't like these nuclear power plants. They hear that and they go, "Oh no, oh my gosh, Chernobyl! You remember that, right?" We got to play it safe. We got to figure out good ways and stuff like that. And there's been a lot of improvements over the years as well.
I agree. I've seen that whenever people tend to discredit nuclear energy, they always attack archaic examples that have very clear flaws. Um, the Chernobyl one that everyone knows that could have
Hmm.
easily been prevented and is a terrible example as to why we shouldn't do nuclear energy. But I
Hmm.
want to talk about the Japanese nuclear incident because I heard that there were incidents where like infrastructure experts would warn that we can have bigger tsunamis, and they did have walls to block the waves, but a lot of people commented before it happened that the walls could have been higher and better. So honestly, from what I've seen on all the examples of nuclear failures, it just seems like negligence and a lack of foresight rather than nuclear energy being something that we should be scared of because it's difficult to do or it's risky. Honestly, for any country that can support the infrastructure like the United States or Japan, or I even think Russia could do it nowadays. I feel like, you know, it's very strange that certain countries are not. um, going for this option. And
Hmm.
we've even seen Germany transition to coal and tear down some nuclear stuff due to like political propaganda and like the population being scared of nuclear energy, which I think is a great shame.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. I think when you look at when you look at both of those disasters, and especially what they did with the environment, it is actually genuinely amazing how far we came, right? Because with Chernobyl, that was such a huge disastrous thing for the environment around it. But when you go look at the Fukushima incident, I believe it was only like maybe six documented cases of like radiation burns. Someone may have died of lung cancer that might have been attributed to it, and it it didn't seep into anything, right? People were displaced, of course, because you don't want to live near a nuclear meltdown, but it is genuinely, I mean, amazing, right? We have so many technological advances and more understanding about how these things work.
Excellent. See, there I feel like we can transition to misinformation because there's 2 points there I want to
Hmm.
tackle. Because you're already aware of the misinformation around the dangers of it and why we shouldn't do it, but I believe you're misguided on some of the propaganda that was released by like the Japanese government towards their nuclear disaster, because the ocean around that area is still radioactive, and people who eat
Really?
yeah, and there are laws and regulations that have only recently been changed to allow people to eat fish within the area because the it was a nuclear meltdown because of the tsunami. So of course there's going to be nuclear waste inside of the ocean afterwards. And while cleanup was very extensive and the short-term repercussions were dealt with very well, the long-term repercussions are just unavoidable. I mean, we've seen an increase in cancer um, for like the surrounding area, for like the elderly populations, and the fish around that area, even though they're considered safe to eat now, I we've seen evidence that they are not the safest fish to eat. And to transition further into misinformation, I want to ask your opinion. Why do
Hmm?
you think there is so much misinformation about environmentalism in general, not only nuclear energy?
Well, there's kind of 2 points that you can come into that, right? The first one is you obviously have the companies that are benefiting from these outdated energy sources that absolutely wreck the environment. And then two, you have the more kind of political side where it's a, like you said, with the misinformation, right, for Japan, it's like, hey, this is all good. Don't worry about it. Like, it's fine. The same thing was happening with Chernobyl until it was fully released. And I think there's those 2 points have people who are very scared of change, right? That's the biggest that's the biggest thing about humans is that we're changing beings, but we are afraid of change. And especially when it's an economic sense, um, there's such a huge upside to changing our ways when it comes to energy that's so much better for the environment and that doesn't destroy it. But, if I'm making $1 million a month off of like coal or something, you're gonna have to really, really convince me to stop doing that?
Right, of course, because according to my research in Germany, there were multiple powerful political lobbyists that were campaigning against nuclear energy so that, you know, the German government would buy into coal and other nuclear. Yeah, it seems like coal and fossil fuel lobbyists are very powerful in Germany, and they kind of like created propaganda for these other activists to latch onto. Because, I mean, like you said, even in modern day, we're still seeing people cite nuclear disasters that happened decades ago. And, I mean, we've seen
Yeah.
how far technology has come since then. And so I think it's very interesting that you mention politics, because I believe that um, the biggest obstacle for cleaner energy, for a cleaner environment, and all that good stuff is just the politicians. Um, Not only are the politicians buying into the propaganda that these lobbyists are making, but these lobbyists are buying these politicians. I mean, would you consider lobbying ethical in terms of like a government practice? Well, let's have a more specific question about environmentalism. Like,
Yeah.
do you believe that politicians should be held accountable for for like future mishaps that happen because of these issues? Let's say in 20 years, we're um, the sky is like 5 degrees hotter. And do you think there's a way for humanity to hold these lobbyists accountable and these politicians accountable if the planet does keep heating up and if different animal species do keep dying?
Um, yes and no. There definitely is a way that we as a people and citizens can come together and actually hold these people accountable. The problem with that is to gather up the people and the citizens to, hold them accountable. It's very hard to do that to a politician if they're not local or even stateside, right? It's super hard to do that because there's so many steps in between a regular citizen and, say, even a senator, right? There are so many steps in between that if we hold them accountable, we have to do it now, right? There's no need for us to do it when it's too far gone because at that point, it doesn't matter if we hold them accountable or not.
You're very right. Yeah, it definitely seems like a money issue. It feels like, gathering these people takes time and money. Convincing
Yeah.
these politicians, it's hard to find genuine politicians. Um, but
And
like,
that's why I think environmentalism is such a like beautiful thing is because a lot of them realize that it is a political thing inherently, right? It is very political to care about the earth because the other side is making it political to not care about it. And there are so many people that care about the earth and actually care about the planet they live on and want to see it actually be nurtured and go beyond our lifetimes that I think it'll eventually turn out okay, you know?
okay. And why do you believe that there are people out there that like don't support like kind of the same arguments that you're presenting? Do you think it's because the propaganda is so powerful? Do you believe that it's because um, they're just don't think these solutions matter? Like, what are your thoughts? Why do you think there are even regular people out there that believe the environment is not a problem? And do you think that newer generations will be able to stop them? Because it seems like they care more about it.
Yeah, I think you have to break it down into three different parts. You have, right, to go back, you have the economic part, right? A lot of people are concerned that it'll be way too much money to start building nuclear power plants or a bunch of wind turbines, and that it's not a good. use of money, right? You have people that kind of look back in the past and go, well, it's worked all these years. One thing that I hear, right, is the ozone layer problem back in the 80s and 90s, where it was like there's a giant hole in the ozone, we have to fix it. People talk about, like, well, we don't hear that anymore. And that goes into misinformation, which is the third thing. We've
Hmm.
actually fixed the ozone problem because people listened, right?
Oh wow.
So there's a lot of, like, there's obviously still holes in the ozone, but like that big hole that was there, we all came together, listened, and politicians made things and companies changed policies. And it's the misinformation about environmentalism in terms of building better energy sources is always on the negatives, right? There is no talking about the positives.
I agree. I agree that the current, climate around it is to,
Mm,
focus on the negatives and
yeah.
um and just use buzzwords to promote the other side of it. Like um I've seen a lot of politicians produce the idea of clean coal, which like I don't think coal can be clean.
Yeah, I've not, I've heard that, but I've not read or seen anything that would support it.
The main issue is that carbon emission technology, or sorry, technology that is being used to absorb carbon emissions and make them not so harmful. It's just not there. Like the scale that we're able to do it at, we're only able to turn a very small percentage of carbon emissions into harmless gases, and so until that technology like really comes into form and we're able to take these giant like clouds of carbon smoke and turn them into clean breathing air, I definitely think nuclear energy is kind of the way to go. I think if we just keep using coal and just keep burning fossil fuels for energy and we don't find a way to transition, things will just disasters will just keep happening. And while I do believe that like things are getting better, the scariest part um, is that these ideas are still circulating. And people still have, like you said, people still have misinformation about the ozone layer, and but I'm hopeful because it seems like our generation, like Gen Z, and newer generations like Zoomers and Gen Alpha and even Gen Beta in the future when they're
Mm,
more prevalent, I think they care more about the environment. And the reason I believe that is because I believe that the older generations are more subject to misinformation, while the newer generations, they were born with access um, to the internet. So they're basically born with all the information on the planet in their fingertips. And honestly, I
yeah.
believe they'll be able to use that tool of information to stop misinformation and lead humanity to a brighter future.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's it really does boil down to the information that is passed around.
Right, of course.
And
Propaganda.
yeah, no, it's I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, as they say. It comes down to that, and I think I I do agree that, like, our generation, hopefully especially, would kind of step up to the plate. But there's also a lot of people in our generation that do fall for the misinformation and the propaganda because that's what it's made for, is to convince people. So
Yeah, true. I guess
I'm
having all the information at your fingertips could also lead to misinformation.
exactly right. It's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for answering all my questions and speaking with me about the
Yeah, of course,
environment.
of course.
Yeah, thank you. I hope to have you as a guest again one day. And this has been Earth Forward, the environmental podcast, hosted by Leonardo De Alba. And I'll see you later.